Our new best friend, Christopher-Penn, is here with us. He held court last night, and I know there were lots of great conversations because I kept coming in and out and hearing new things every minute that I was listening to this conversation. So I hope you'll have take advantage of spending some time in between breaks or during lunch and getting more answers for yourself. I know Chris is very interested in your views on AI too, so hopefully you'll share with each other. Chris is the co-founder and chief data scientist at TrustInsights. He's an authority on analytics, digital marketing, marketing technology, data science, and machine learning. He is a best-selling author and internationally renowned speaker and has shaped 5 key fields in the marketing industry: Google Analytics adoption, data-driven marketing and PR, modern email marketing, marketing data science, and artificial intelligence and machine learning in marketing. As co-founder and chief data scientist of TrustInsights, he is responsible for the creation of products and services, creation and maintenance of all code and intellectual property, technology and marketing strategy, brand awareness, and research and development. Chris is a 2023 6-time IBM champion in IBM Data and AI, a Brand 24 Top 100 Digital Marketer, and Analytica Top 100 AI and Marketing Influencer, and, as I know some of you knew, a co-host of the award-winning Marketing Over Coffee marketing podcast. Prior to co-founding TrustInsights, he built the marketing for a series of startups with 100% successful exit rate. We just want to get in on that. He has been in SaaS, public relations, and financial services, and has worked with brands such as Twitter, T-Mobile, Citrix, GoDaddy, AAA, McDonald's, and many others. Chris is an IBM Watson Machine Learning Certified Professional, a Google Analytics Certified Professional, a Google Ads Certified Professional, a Google Digital Sales Certified Professional, and a HubSpot Inbound Certified Professional. He is the author of over 24 books, including bestsellers such as AI for Marketers, a primer and introduction, Marketing White Belt, Basics for the Digital Marketer, Marketing Red Belt, Connecting with Your Creative Mind, and the Blue Belt, From Data Zero to Marketing Hero, and Leading Innovation. Chris will help us level set where we are, take questions to make sure we're all in the same place, and launch us on these 2 days of discussions of AI. So again, so grateful that you're here. Have we finished our technology exchange?
Thank goodness for extremely long.
Yeah. You do not look old enough to have done all these things, so I don't know, right? But absolutely excited to have you here. Let's take advantage of you.
That's most kind of you. Thank you so much. And a big round of applause, please, for Rand and Lynn and Lori. So we're going to talk about artificial intelligence today, and specifically generative AI. These slides have an expiration date. This field changes so fast, I literally put 2 slides in this morning. You can't sneeze without hitting something about generative AI. This is kind of a known. And for those who are not familiar, for the 5 people who did not raise their hand, these are some of the systems that are out there. There's, of course, ChatGPT, which is probably the most well-known version. There is Google's Bard, which recently got an upgrade. You can now do things like check your email with generative AI. There's Google's Search Generative Experiments. Anyone here work in SEO, search engine optimization? Okay, a couple folks. Some interesting things are going to be happening to you shortly. There's Microsoft Bing, which uses OpenAI's backend technology. There's Anthropic's Claude, which was just heavily invested in by Amazon. Amazon's AWS division injected $1.5 billion into this company. There's the open source models. This is a system called LM Studio, where you can take a language model, load it to your laptop, and run it on your machine, not talking to the internet at all, and be able to work with these tools. Some really, really cool stuff. And we're going to talk about how to decide which ones to use. When we're talking terminology, when we say language model, we're really just talking about software. If Microsoft Word is a piece of software made for humans, but to use, a model is software made for AI to use, for machines to use. So that's what they are. There's all these interfaces. We just talked about a bunch of them. There's interfaces, and then there's models. The models are not named by marketers. But it's important to know, because what's happening in the space is that more and more tools are coming out that allow you to change models, to say, I want to change and use a different model for a given purpose. So what is a model? All of this begins in 1957 with a quote by John Rupert said, you shall know a word by the company it keeps it. When we talk about language, we're talking about programming us as humans, right? If any of you are parents, the first time your child says your name or your role, you're like, ha, I programmed it successfully. My child knows my name. And we have structure and syntax in our programming language. If I say I'm brewing the tea, for most North American English speakers, you understand that I'm talking about a beverage made with dried leaves and hot water. If I change one word, the other words will change meaning, right? If I say I'm spilling the tea, now it means gossip, right? So one word changes to another word. There's statistical distributions that are predictable in human language, and that's how language models work, because they're taking language, turning it to numbers, and then saying, what are the probabilities of the next word, the next phrase, the next sentence? How do these things work? Believe it or not, these are about 6 years old now. So the first transformer, which is the underlying architecture, nothing to do with the really cool 80s toys, was created in 2017 by Google, and it was only until like the last 18 months that the general public has gotten a hold of these things. We're not going to go over any of this math because it's way too early in the morning. How these things work is you take massive amounts of text and you find the statistics. If, say, a web page or a piece of paper, let's call that, just as an example, a pizza, right? Just for fun. A model would be a cookbook. So if you were to go around the world, I mean, we're in Chicago, the home of deep dish pizza, which is like a swimming pool filled with cheese. If you were to go around the world and eat pizza in every pizzeria, what you would have at the end, if you took notes, you would have a cookbook of all the pizzas. You would also have severe illness. And you would be able to say, I know everything there is to know about pizza because I've eaten pizza in every city on the planet. And you know thin crust, thick crust, stuffed crust, New York slice, Neapolitan, you name it. You know what pizza is. And then anytime somebody came to you and said, hey, I have this idea for pizza. Maybe you can make something like, mushroom and ham and bacon and pineapple on pizza. Half of them is going to say pineapple doesn't belong on pizza, but that's fine. Regardless of what you say, because you have so much experience, you have this cookbook, you could probably guess how to make that pizza. That's how a language model works. It has seen so much of our human language that anything we give it, there's probably, in the largest models, a prediction that says, I've seen this before, or something like this, and I can make something like it for you. We do this through what's called prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is just a way to say, talk to the models, code these models. Again, you'll know a word about a company it keeps. If I say, write a short paragraph about how AI is being used in marketing, the tools will give me back their best guess, their probabilities, based on every word in that sentence. You'll notice what it spits out is boring and bland, right? This is completely non-creative. Why? Because probabilities. I gave it so few words that it has to guess, infer, what am I trying to talk about? And it spits out the highest probability returns on that. Because they're so boring and it's such a short prompt, it's going to come up with boring outputs. If I go with a longer prompt, say, write a short paragraph about how AI is being used in marketing with a focus on transformer-based generative AI models, such as those found in GPT-4 and Claude, now I have changed the number of words in the prompt, which means I've changed the number of probabilities that the machine can invoke, which means I get a better response. This is less boring, still boring, but it's less boring than what I started with, because it's figuring out, oh, there's these other terms involved, and the intersection of all those probabilities, and it's basically a library of probability, makes it come up with a better piece of text. If I go a little nuts and say, you're an AI expert, AI, machine learning, blah, 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 blah. You also know marketing, write a short paragraph. I've given it a lot of words. I've given it a lot of probabilities. And now what it comes up with is a lot more unique. When you hear people talk about, oh, AI can't be creative, it's because you're using non-creative prompts, right? These tools are just mirrors of our language. The more creative we are in their use, the more creative they can be in return. Think of these things as really smart interns, right? They know nothing about your business. First day on the job, but they got like a PhD. How would you talk to an intern at your company? Right? How would you talk to that person? Would you say, oh, intern, design a new logo, right? That's not going to go well. You would give very specific instructions. The more relevant words you use in a prompt, the better the machine performs. Some of the prompts that I use are 3 and 4 pages of text. When I have very specific things I need it to do, I will give it examples, I will give it conditions, I will give it background information, I will give it data so that it creates what I want it to create. We have a structure for it called RACE, role, action, context, execute, how to write a prompt well. Tell the machine who it is. You are a Google Analytics certified professional. You know Google Analytics 4, Tag Manager, Google Looker Studio, BigQuery. All keywords, right? All words that invoke probabilities. Your first task is to examine this table, channel grouping data, and analyze the overall composition of site traffic. You'll be analyzing for marketing channel diversity. That's the action I want the model to take. Here's the background information, the context. Here's the data. You can copy and paste actual data in. The execution, analyze the composition of the site traffic and provide recommendations in bullet point format for marketers' next steps to increase traffic. So now I give execution instructions. Here's what I want you to do. When you run that prompt, you get your reporting, you get some analysis, and then you get your recommendations. Right? And so this is a really nice summary of the data and invoking what the model knows based on this prompt.
Very basic question. I'm one of the people who didn't raise their hand on using AI. Is it searching published, publicly available information? It could be a book, it could be a white paper, it could be marketing literature.
So the question is for folks at home, is it searching publicly available information? The answer is no, it's already done that when the model was created. These companies basically went out and used a library called Common Crawl, which is an open source public nonprofit that scrapes the entire public internet and puts it in giant archives. If you have a hard drive that can handle 6.3 petabytes, you can download it too. It's not very interesting. There's a PDF. No, you don't need to fill any forms. I go to TrustInsights.ai, get this PDF, and you can print this thing out. It's a good guide. And we're also going to give a copy of the slides to everyone too, so you don't have to run around. So let's talk about how do we use these things, because one of the big challenges people have is, okay, this thing sounds like magic. It's not, it's math. It sounds like magic. What do I do with it? There's 6 categories of use cases. And here's the thing, this is not marketing. Because language models are human language, it applies to any discipline where we use language. So, do you use language in HR? Do you use language in finance? Do you use language in sales? Do you use language in janitorial? The answer is yes. Any function in a company where you use language, you can use language models. And these are the 6 categories: generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. Let's talk about generation first. We know this one easy. Write a blog post, write an email, and so on and so forth. Make some text, make some language from what you know based on the prompt. These tools can do a lot of language generation, and not just in one language. They can mix and match languages. The big models like GPT-4 know about 130 languages. Ask it sometime to try translating a document into Sanskrit. You want to see an interesting example. They can do writing in almost any discipline that is publicly available. So this is an example. I was setting up a new website for a customer, and I said, I need to write a privacy policy. Best practices, here's what the site has, here's the marketing technology it has, write me a privacy policy. It did. I then handed it to a human lawyer to validate it. The human lawyer said, yeah, that was pretty good. I can't bill you. They were not happy about that. And here we are. They can write code. They can write code in most of the large popular programming languages, so PHP, R, Python, Java, C. If there's a bunch of text about it on like Stack Exchange, they can write code in, and the code is about 95 to 98% correct. So you still need some domain expertise because it almost certainly never runs right the first time, and you got to be able to solve errors, but they're usually trivial errors. There's a version of this in ChatGPT called advanced data analysis, where it actually runs the code, figures out that it didn't do it right, and can continue to adjust. But these things can write software. They can write their own software, which is really creepy to watch. Second category is extraction. You can take data out of something. So I gave the language model our sort of mission statement, corporate stuff, and said, give me an SEO keyword list based on this background data, including semantics. So give me keywords that are not in this, but are semantically related. It came up with a bunch. There's things like organizational theory consulting. We don't have that in that document, but it's semantically related. It's a language model. It's basically a giant thesaurus and can come up with keyword lists. This is one of my favorite examples. How many people love going to meetings? You have the ability to record meetings. We're recording them right now, right? We have all these devices on there, look like a board. And we can have machines transcribe these things. Now, the best part about this is that take that transcript and say, just give me the meeting notes and action items, right? You can do this in the language models themselves. There are companies that actually do this in their interface. This is one that I use called Otter. I say, just give me the major points of this transcript. This is a huge time saver because I don't want to relive the meeting that I just got out of, listening to the transcript again, and reading the transcript again. I can say, give me the action items. Give me the action items by person. And if the transcript identifies who each person is, give me the action items by person. This saves time. This is incredibly valuable if you do any kind of consulting, if you do any kind of B2B work where you're talking to a client and then you have 15 minutes later, you're like, what did I talk about on that call? I don't remember, but I know I promised something. Have the machine fish that out for you and turn to something useful. If you do anything with customer service, having these digests be automatically inserted into your CRM is incredibly valuable so that the next person who talks to that customer, you can say, oh, here's the 5 things you talked about on the last call. Let's continue on. Google's Bard now ties into Google Workspace. So Gmail, Google Docs, YouTube. This is about a week old. I said, extract a list of senders from my inbox and count how many emails I have for each sender. Arrange in bullet point lists so I can see who's been emailing me. I can even tell, now show me the ones that are the most important that I should probably not keep ignoring. You can extract information with language models. Third, summarization, taking big things and turning them into small things. I took 20 interviews I did with members of this organization, just like the one-on-ones yesterday, recorded them, transcribed them, and said, okay, here's all 20 of these things. Let's boil them down and write one mission statement for this company. Super powerful because, again, we're doing essentially voice of the customer, where we can say, machine, digest all this down into just one paragraph, and it does a great job of that. Speaking of voice of the customer, one of my absolute favorite applications is taking customer data and using it for marketing. So my martial arts teacher has a page on Google Business, has a bunch of reviews. I copied and pasted all the 5-star reviews and said, now write me social media copy and suggested content based on what real customers said. These ads resonate better because it's not me saying what I think is important, right? Nobody cares what I think. It was important what other people think the value is of the business. So you create great content that uses the real words of customers in aggregate for social media content. I'll summarize my inbox. This is just look for correspondence addressed to me personally from senders I've replied to in the past as a way to judge importance. Senders that have not replied to in the last 90 days should not be considered important. Make a bullet list. So again, some good summarization. This is a fun one. Taking restaurant reviews. So this is fictional, some dummy data. But I took 2,900 reviews and said, give me an analysis of these reviews. Here's the strengths of this restaurant. Here's the weaknesses based on customer reviews. We're thinking about, and it's funny, Megan, you mentioned Ingredion. Ingredion used to be one of our clients about 5 years ago with a subsidiary called TIC Gums. And we did a project almost exactly like this, taking all the data that was in their Salesforce instance and looking for unusual questions. And one thing that came out at that time was oat milk was having an issue with stabilization. And so we found that fairly early on and said, you guys need to have a stabilizer for oat milk. And it was like $1.5 billion market opportunity. Yeah, it was fun. I don't know what that is. Ignore it. All right. Fourth, rewriting, the ability to take content and transform it. Again, these are language models, so they can take one form of language to another. Here's one, I got this NDA from a partner in the entertainment industry. I looked at this thing and I'm like, did you copy and paste this off of Reddit? Did you drunk? What happened? It turns out it was both. And my lawyer's like, do not sign that. It's unenforceable. So I said, okay, rewrite this as a proper NDA using best practices. It did. My lawyer took a look at it and said, now you can sign this version. Go ahead. So you can rewrite other people's documents. If they give you something that you don't like, fix it. This is one of the secrets of language models that we don't give them enough credit for. They are incredible tutors, incredible teachers. Anytime you have a concept that you don't understand, ask it to explain it to you in a concept you do. So in large language models, there's a whole bunch of calculus and linear algebra about model parameters and weights, about the number of tokens that creates the number of parameters and the model weights within it. When I read some of those papers, I'll be honest, they kind of sometimes just slide off my brain. So I said, explain this concept to me in terms of pizza. And it said, parameters are the variety of ingredients on the pizza. The weights are how much of each ingredient there is. And so I'm like, oh, now I understand what parameters and weights are within this concept, right? And it's pretty easy. If you play music and there's a difficult concept like quantum superposition, ask a model, explain quantum superposition to me in terms of music composition, or in terms of music theory. If you play golf, have it explain a really technical concept like weights and activations within a language model in terms of golf. Any concept you have it explained in a domain you know, and it can do that, and you can learn much, much faster. Oh, thanks. You can also get translations, doing it into other languages. Yes, sir, question in the back, and I think this one with the microphone's gonna be running, all right?
Yeah, I'll be out, Chris. That's really interesting analogy there. But that suggests that somehow that AI derives an underlying formula from all the data it has access to.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't that lead to a lowest common denominator approach versus a very specific or unique outcome? I'm struggling with that.
You're correct. Again, with prompt length and specificity, if you give it a low specificity prompt, you will absolutely get a bland, sort of high, washed out response. If you give it more detail, the more detail you give it, the more you're going to be invoking more sparse outcomes within the model. This is a fun one. This is a real memo. Wow, you sent over 2 months invoices one day. Of course it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this stuff takes time. And if you needed it soon, you should have let it sit on your effing desk for 2 weeks. You can F right off and you'll get it when you get it. Go F yourself, Karen. And accounting. Rewrite this in a professional tone voice. Give up. Okay, that's a nice one. If you've ever had something you wanted to say and know you probably should not say it, say it to a language model, have it rewrite it, and turn it to something that's a little more appropriate. Again, it's rewriting, being able to translate from one language to another. The fifth is classification. Having these models process language. So here is a blog post giving me the topics and the relevant scores for the percentage of that topic within it. If you've just inherited a new blog, if you've got a competitor's content you want to analyze, you feed it all that in and say, organize this for me, help me classify and understand it. This is a fun one, personality insights based on the Big Five, which is a psychology framework. I was talking to a new client contact that took the transcript and read all the words that she said on a call, put it in a model and said, tell me about this person's personality. And it came through with a bunch of different scores. Kind of interesting for just fun. Useful in the context, imagine you're in sales and you just get a new prospect handed off from marketing. Who is this person? You're in customer service, you just get a new account handed off from sales. Who is this person? What are the kinds of traits that I might want to know about this person when I'm talking to them? And finally, question answering. These tools are very, very good at answering questions. Sometimes they're good at answering questions just from the knowledge they have. Again, they've scraped up most of the internet. I was asking about import laws for the Czech Republic and body armor. It gave me some answers that I went. And the tools now have validation buttons that say, Bing does and Bard does, to say, validate that this is actually true, this is not hallucination. And this was, you cannot import body armor to the Czech Republic. The more useful question answering about your content. So in Claude, I loaded an NDA and I said, this NDA should be bilateral and fair to both parties. Do the terms and conditions reflect this, right? Put in anything that's, again, maybe not proprietary, but it's any kind of contract, any kind of agreement, and ask it, hey, here are the conditions under which I should or should not sign agreements. Should I sign this? Right? Take an RFP that you received, and instead of saying, oh my God, I have to read this 47-page document, say, these are the 5 things I actually care about in this RFP. Does this RFP contain these 5 things? And the tools can tell you with a high degree of accuracy when you give them the data. Yes, here's what's in it that you want, but you know this is what's in it you do not want. When do you use this stuff? We used to say there were specific use cases. The more time goes on, the more we're realizing you pretty much should try using it for everything and find out for yourself which things it's not good at. This is a study that came out of Harvard Business School about 2 weeks ago at Boston Consulting Group. They took 795 of their consultants and said, we're going to split you into three groups. There's a control group, we're just going to have you use ChatGPT, or we're going to have you use ChatGPT with a 1-hour tutorial on how to use it properly. Across the board, the consultants finished 12% more tasks than those who did not use AI. They completed tasks 25% faster than those who did not use AI. And the stunning one was the work quality was 40% higher for those who used AI than those who did not, which kind of makes you go, well, okay, these folks are not dummies, right? They're not just sitting there like slinging cans of tuna around. These folks are doing deep knowledge work, and in a consulting firm, what you pay exorbitant, reassuringly expensive prices to work with, and yet machines are still able to help them. This morning, this article in Nature was a creativity test, a series of 14 different tasks. You can download the papers and read through them yourself if you're curious what they asked. But across the board, AI scored better at divergent creative thinking than humans did at the mean and the median. There were still plenty of examples where individual humans scored better than machines, but as a cohort, the machines did a better job of being creative than humans did. The paper very kindly said a bunch of humans did create a bunch of really bad ideas. So when do you use this? You try it for everything. The thing we recommend people do is look at 2 sets of tasks and 2 perspectives. Internal within your company, what are the processes right now that are the biggest time sucks, the biggest money sucks, the things that you just hate doing? What are those tasks internally? And then externally, what are those same kinds of categories, things that suck, that customers have to put up with? So internal and external, divide up your tasks and processes. And then, are you looking to build something net new that would be innovative, internally or externally? Or are you looking to optimize an existing process? Again, internally, externally. Just standard consulting, spend some time with your leadership teams and say, what are the things that we need to do, internal or customer facing, that are either innovative or essentially streamlining, and that will help you figure out where to start using AI. And this is prioritized based on urgency and importance. Now, these things are not all sunshine and roses. They have problems because these things are created from human language, and the human race as a whole is kind of not great all the time. They have biases. This is from OpenAI's disclaimer. For example, we found that our models more strongly associated European American names with positive sentiment compared to African American names, and negative stereotypes of Black women in specifically. So this is on the warning label for one of the largest models out there. 3 weeks ago, we did a test on our live stream with a sales prompt, a HR prompt, and a marketing prompt, where we changed, out of a 2-paragraph prompt, we changed 1 word. We changed the word Larry to Lena, and the outputs differed pretty dramatically. There's strong gender bias in specific contexts unless you know to prompt to prevent that. So these tools are not infallible, they are not magic, and you do need to be careful with the outputs, especially if it's going to be something that is customer-facing. There's a lot of debate about copyright. Here's where things stand right now. In the US and most of the world, it is unsettled in law as to whether these companies had the rights to use other people's data as training data. The EU has ruled that is a violation of copyright, and so there's some challenges there, and Canada has as well. Japan went the other way and said model training data does not violate copyright because Japan wants to try and encourage more innovation and tech growth company in Japan. So you're going to see a patchwork of laws around the world based on what that country's priorities are and how much tech investment they want to prioritize. On the output side, in 2018, a chimpanzee took a selfie. That whole thing went to a court case called Naruto versus Slater. The courts ruled that the chimpanzee took the photo, it did the work. Chimpanzees are not human, only humans can hold copyright. And that law has then been sort of extrapolated across the spectrum. Machine-generated output cannot be copyrighted. Machine-generated output cannot be copyrighted. If you put up a blog post that ChatGPT wrote on your blog, a competitor can copy and paste that thing with no repercussions because it cannot be copyrighted. If you work with clients and in your contracts, you have an IP assignment clause that says you assign IP for the work that you create to that client, and you hand them machine-generated content, you're in violation of that contract because you are in breach of contract because you cannot assign copyright to things that are not copyrightable. So you have to be aware of these things, and you want to talk to your legal counsel about that.
Any work product that is being transferred.
Any work product that is being transferred that was made by machine cannot be copyrighted, and therefore, if that is a requirement of your contract, it cannot be assigned. Regulation is coming. We can be pretty sure of a couple things. One, with the open source movement, any regulation is going to be completely ineffective. I mean, Congress makes ineffective regulation anyway, but it's doubly so now. And the regulations are going to vary from country to country, from municipality to municipality. So be aware that it's going to be, if you think GDPR was bad, this is going to be worse. And some of these models are capable, the open source ones, of being poisoned. What that means is that you can merge models together to try and make them do specific tasks and things. There are some models out there that are being released with a political agenda. There's one from the government of China that has been released. It's best in class for a lot of its tasks, but curiously, when you ask about China or communism, it's uniformly positive and complimentary. Weird. They want other people to be taking that model and incorporating their model training data into your own models and spreading that particular idea throughout the ecosystem. So you have to know where your models are coming from. So how do we use these things? There's sort of 4 steps on your journey, from basic prompt engineering to deployment to tuning to app construction. Prompt engineering, like I started, there's so many different tools. So there's some different cases depending on what you're trying to do. If you're working with sensitive information, protect PII, SPI, protect health information, you cannot use a third party. You cannot use ChatGPT. You cannot use Anthropic. Unless you're under an enterprise contract with one of those companies that has those protections written into the contract. You just opening up ChatGPT is not sufficient. They can use that data. One thing I found out from our lawyer recently is that if you have trade secrets, the moment you paste a trade secret into a chatbot, you have forfeited your right to enforce it because you handed it to a third party. So anything like that is, you want to use one of these local open source models that runs on your laptop, sends no data anywhere, and it can be self-contained. You're working with customer data, any identifiable data, any confidential data, you have to use a local model. If you're writing code, GPT-4, LLaMa, image processing, Google Bard does that. For writing and reading and writing text under 8,000 words, ChatGPT is a good choice. For over 8,000 words, Anthropic's Claude is a good choice. For real-time information, Bing or Bard, do not use the ChatGPT models because they go back only to January 2022. They don't know anything after that date. For analyzing data, ChatGPT's advanced data analysis is useful. And again, for restricted topics, there are some topics you can't talk about with public models. They will simply say, I can't do that. There are topics around specific kinds of drugs. If you work in industrial manufacturing, there are some chemicals that you can't ask these things about, right? You can, there's nothing bad happens. They ask me about things like nitroglycerin, and they get very, very touchy very, very quickly. So you have to use some of the uncensored models for those. Again, the basic interfaces. This is the private system where you can run it internally. You can run it on servers inside your company and then provide that to employees so that these private models can scale very well inside a company. These tools are showing up everywhere. So this is Microsoft Visual Studio Code. You can right click and have it say, fix my code, I did something wrong, and it will do that. Microsoft just announced a week ago that Copilot will be in all their products by the end of the year. So this is in Microsoft Office, Microsoft Windows, the ability to give control, to control your software using language models. So yeah, make a presentation from this press release, turn this, what are the 5 things I need to know in this spreadsheet? So, and it will use your data within your Office 365 environment. You can also control Windows for it. It's like, hey, I'm trying to find that one file that I think I worked on 3 years ago. You know where I put it?
I had a question.
Yes.
Can the non-open models use your data but also compare it to external data?
Can the private models use your data but compare it to external data? So they have some knowledge of external data, but we're actually going to talk about that in just a little while. The most important thing you can do for getting started is to start a prompt library. Use the tool of your choice, the note-taking tool of your choice, to save your prompts as you make them, so that A, within your team, you can share them internally with others, sort of develop a best practice library, and B, improve on them over time. So Evernote, Microsoft OneNote, I use a piece of software called Joplin. If you're stuck in the 7th level of hell, you can use SharePoint. But you should be storing these things and their responses so that you can tune things up. From there, we'll start to think about deploying these prompts. If you find a prompt that works really well for your team, you can work with your development team, your IT teams, to actually build it into code and then run that code. So if you find a prompt that analyzes a blog post really well, and you don't want to copy and paste that 10,000 blog posts to ChatGPT, you work with your developers to have them write that into code that can then run and do tasks at scale. Third is fine-tuning models. So fine-tuning a model is basically like taking a dog and training it to do one thing really well. So maybe training it to sniff bombs. That dog cannot then sniff for sniff for drugs or earthquake survivors or things like that. It's probably not so good at playing fetch. It will still be a couch potato, but that dog has one focus. The same thing is true of fine-tuning a model. You're going to give it some extra training data and say, I want you to get really good at this task to the detriment of the other things. So it will no longer be able to turn Guns N' Roses lyrics into limericks, but it will be able to do that one thing you really wanted to do well. You have to have data to do this, and preferably a lot of it. So this is an example. I took all the blog posts of my CEO, got them out of the database, did all the processing to tune it, and then fed it to, in this case, this was an example using OpenAI, basically trained a model to write just like her. It doesn't do much else. Like, it's not really good at anything else except writing just like her, but it catches her writing style in a way that no prompt can. It's just so finely tuned. If there are specific high-value tasks, remember that 2x2 matrix we showed? If there's specific high-value tasks that you want to do in your organization that you absolutely want done a certain way, you'll fine-tune a model, public or private, to make tools specialize in that. And again, this is stuff that can run on your laptop. Yes?
How do you upload data from your laptop to ChatGPT or Bard? I queried it, and it basically said it couldn't read, one of them said it couldn't read the file from your laptop.
So if you're fine-tuning, OpenAI has an entire toolkit. So the question was for the folks at home, how do you load your own data to these tools? So if you're fine-tuning, OpenAI provides an entire developer's toolkit to do that. You have to have a lot of technical comfort working with things like command line tools to be able to do that.
So you can't just ask it to read the file.
You can ask it to read some files. Bard can read images,
Yes.
but it can't read anything else. Anthropic's Claude can read PDFs, Word documents, text files. And then ChatGPT can read CSV files and SQL files. So again, knowing which kind of data you're working with determines which tool you can upload to. Fine-tuning is super powerful because, again, the more fine-tuned a model is, the shorter your prompts have to be because it's only really good at one thing. And finally, we get to app construction. This is where these models are becoming incredibly capable. A language model is good at language. It's not good at not language. There's a whole bunch of things that we do that are not language, like math, that they really, really suck at. But there are these ecosystem tools, one of which is called LangChain, that allows you to glue together different components, including different language models, to be able to harness what they're best at. So yesterday in my hotel room, I had some blog posts. I wanted to use a language model to summarize it, but I didn't have the blog posts. I just had the URLs. So I used one of these tools to say, okay, first you're going to build a web scraper. It's going to go out. I'm going to give you the URLs. You're going to scrape those URLs. Then you're going to find the title and just the text on the page. Convert that into a format that a model can read. The model is going to summarize it, and then another part in this tool that's not the model then turns it back into a nice Excel file. Right? So only one part of this is a language model, but with these ensemble tools now, you can have multiple models working together and non-model pieces connecting the parts. So if you can imagine, if I wanted to do this with internal documents, I could have it load internal documents, writing tools for me to do these things. The most terrifying example of this I used a tool called Agent GPT. I said, here's the login page to my website, Christopher-Penn.com. Find a working login. And it spun up a few language models and other components, went out onto the web, started downloading hacked password lists and stuff, and then started trying to break into my website. Yeah, that was fun.
Did it succeed? Did it succeed?
Maybe. I need to change my password. The critical thing to remember about this is that because language models are essentially language tools, you are programmers now. Everyone in this room is a programmer because you are programming when you give a piece of software instructions to get a result, right? You may not be writing in Python or Java, you're writing in English or Italian or Spanish, but you are a programmer. So how is this going to impact marketing? This is a study that came out in Search Engine Land 2 weeks ago on the effect of the AI summarization in Google. In their test, there was a limited test for their clients. They saw a minimum loss of 18% of search traffic to their website because of these AI-generated summaries. You can ask these questions and not need to leave Google. The worst case for them was 64% loss of organic search traffic. And you can tell this just from your use. If you put in your company name, ask these things what it knows about, but you'll notice there's no links in here. There's links in here in Bing, but my company, which should be the top link, is number 3. So I'm probably not going to get a whole lot of traffic from that. ChatGPT doesn't give anything to click on. The public models don't give anything to click on. And the worst impact is on unbranded search. So asking, what are some good resources to learn about B2B marketing? These are good resources. They're not linked, so none of these places are getting traffic, right? Same here, there's a few different links. You use like 3. So 3 people are going to get clicks and that's it. In GPT, nothing there. So all of these places are going to basically take away search traffic. They're going to take away that part of the buyer's journey where people are doing the exploration. And instead, they're going to replace it with their answers. So one of the first things to do in your marketing team is to go into your Google Search Console account or your Microsoft Bing Webmaster Tools account and look at the percentage of unbranded organic search you get. Look at the percentage of unbranded organic search you get. If you get 50% or more of your site traffic from unbranded search, you need a plan to fix this quickly because you're in a lot of trouble. That 18 to 64% traffic loss is going to hit you hard. How do we fix it? Well, there's 3 things you can do. Number 1, language models scrape text from the internet. That's how they're trained. The more text there is of you, the more they will have knowledge of who you are and what you do. So to the extent that you and your company can be everywhere you can possibly be, because there is no ranking in how a language model collects data, right? An article in the New York Times to you and I is important, or the Wall Street Journal. An article in the East Peoria Sunset News, not so much important, right? It's not going to drive business for us. But to a language model, they're identical. They're just pieces of text. So talk to your PR teams, your PR agencies. Get on every podcast you possibly can, especially ones that provide transcripts. If they don't provide a transcript, make a transcript yourself and put it on your website. Get in as many places as you can be for your company and brand so that when the next time these bots come through and vacuum up all this information to make the next iteration of the model, you're more likely to be in there. Yes, sir.
So just to make sure I understand, so does that mean a learning language model has even more of a bias towards long form than the Google algorithm?
The question is, does language models have a more of a bias towards long form? They have a more of a bias towards more text. So it could either be, it could be one long piece, or it could be 100 short pieces. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be out there in quantity. Second, you need channels that are not controlled or intermediated by AI. Search obviously has been for a while, but it's getting much worse with generative AI. Social media has been a loss for 10 years, but it's getting even worse. Things like an email newsletter are surprisingly one of the best assets you have, especially in B2B, to insulate yourself by having a way to reach your customers directly. If you are not emailing people on a regular and frequent basis with useful content, now is the time to start. I mean, it was the time to start was 20 years ago, but now is the time to start. With the way people's attention spans are going, if your email marketing program is less than frequent than weekly, you should probably look at how do you make it weekly, because that's about people's attention span. Out of curiosity, how many people here remember when Seinfeld was on? When was it on?
Yesterday.
What day and time was it on? Why do you know that 30 years later?
Because I ran from work.
Right? Because it was valuable content at a regular, frequent, predictable time, right? The same thing is true for email marketing. So if your email marketing is valuable content at a predictable time, it does better. Third, having communities of some kind that you can join that are not mediated by AI. So this is an example. This is a Slack group we run called Analytics for Marketers. There's an entire ecosystem of systems called Discord that is essentially chat groups online that is gigantic. It's the fastest growing community platform on the planet. There's like 500 million users on it now. It used to be all gamers and kids, and now it's gamers, kids, and all of us other folks. But having some community where it's all chronological, there's no brownie points for posting extra, is a great place to do it. Do not build a community on a place like LinkedIn groups or Facebook because that's intermediated by AI. That doesn't help you. How do you prepare your career? This is the question everybody has. Who's going to lose their jobs? Brookings Institute said AI will take tasks, not jobs. That is somewhat true. Here's the reality. AI will not take your job because your job is a series of tasks. And some of your tasks, like going to meetings, AI can't do even though we wish it could. But the person who is skilled at AI will take the jobs, plural, of people who are not. The person who is skilled at AI will take the jobs of people who are not because you are more productive, right? We saw that in the BCG study, 40% higher quality work, 25% faster work. You will take the jobs of people who are not. So your imperative is to get skilled at this stuff. Go back to 1762. There was a profession called spinster. Spinsters took fiber and wove it into thread. That year, a spinning jenny was invented. The spinning jenny is basically just did the work of 10 people, right? So one person could operate this machine, process 10 times as much fiber into thread. And so a bunch of spinsters had no profession after that. A few of them went on to operate these machines, but then they had to find other things to do. Now, that created a distortion in the labor market. It created distortion in the supply chain because now you suddenly have a crap ton more thread, so you now need more weavers to turn that thread into cloth and so on and so forth. And on the other end, it also increased demand for the raw materials, right? Because now you can process a lot more of it. The same thing will happen with AI. It will absolutely take away the need for a whole bunch of jobs, but it will create weird distortions in the supply chain on either end of it that will increase demand for other kinds of jobs. So it will be kind of, for those who are economists, Schumpeter's creative destruction. To give you a sense of this, the Wired Skilled strike, which just ended yesterday, started on May 2nd at noon. 14 minutes later, this one person who works in the field said, I got my first inquiry from a studio needs to write reviews of AI direct dialogue, in case anyone is curious how quickly this is becoming a problem. Right? That is how fast companies are looking at this because we know as a technology, it works pretty well. So a person who's skilled at AI will take the jobs of people who are not. So what's coming around the corner? These tools are becoming multimodal. They can do things in multiple domains. They can compose music, for example. It's not very good. It's better than what I can do, but it's not very good yet. They can read and write imagery. So this is Google Bard. I took a screenshot from an analytics tool and said, explain to me what's going on here, because I don't feel like writing this report. And it did a really good job, right? Think about all the tools that you use, your CRM, your dashboards, and stuff like that. If you feel like, I don't feel like writing my PowerPoint this month, take a screenshot, load it, and have it ready. And by the way, this is really interesting. This tool, the Bard's tool works on almost any kind of image. It's really fascinating. It doesn't work on anything with a human's face. I took a photo of some food the other day and said, what dish is this? Because I don't recognize it. It just successfully identified it. I've taken X-rays and loaded it and said, show me what anomalies you see in this. And it came up with things that I then checked with the doctor. Like, yeah, that was actually pretty correct. So that's the power of these tools. OpenAI just announced DALL-E 3 this week, which will incorporate ChatGPT. So instead of those weird, if you've tried using image generation and gotten all the weird syntax of that, that's going away now. ChatGPT is just going to ask you for instructions about what the image you want to create. You reply in natural language, and it will generate the image with much, much less trouble than it used to. If you want to see an example of this brought to life, Coca-Cola, which is the brand that we admire for just about trying anything, has a commercial up on YouTube, half of which was made by Stable Diffusion, of famous artworks passing around a bottle of soda. Agent networks are probably the most powerful application coming. We talked about that with LangChain. This one's called GPT Author. It'll write a 15-chapter trashy romance novel. It does it by hooking together a few different instances of a language model to sort of check each other's work. The trashy romance novels it generates are formulaic. They're not great, just like real trashy romance novels. But what's interesting about this is 3 months ago, this couldn't happen, and now it can. This is a fun one. Piece of software I use called Silly Taverns, role-playing software.
I don't think so, but.
All right, cool. I have no idea. I repurposed Silly Tavern and said, I'm going to turn you into a focus group instead.
Are you there?
No.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So here is me, and then Erica Expert, Nellie Novice.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for more details. It's basically
hang up on this person.
ISBM in Thailand has come back and said, hey, I can't see all the data. So obviously now.
He's muted.
Well, all right.
Maybe it's
So I said, here's 3 personas. I loaded 3 synthetic personas into this role play software, told it how much they're allowed to interrupt each other and stuff like that, and asked them to do a product focus group about Google Analytics. If I scratch the names off of here, you would not know that those were synthetic personalities. What they're saying is correct. What they're saying is intelligent. These are real complaints people have about Google Analytics. So this is an example of an agent network creating a synthetic focus group. If you have something you want to try, maybe something you want to pilot with a focus group, you could spin up a synthetic focus group in a couple hours of writing prompts to describe the personas, run it, and see what your virtual people have to say. Again, the more specific you are in your prompts as to who these people are, the better result you're going to get. This is a fun and freaky one. So Fable Studios created an ensemble network of 11 different AI models and all the glue in between, and generated a full 22-minute episode of South Park. Video, audio, script, everything, fully assembled in 3 hours. Now, if you've ever worked in entertainment, you know you can't even get a writer's room to agree on a plot in 3 hours, much less do the episode. The one thing that was wrong with it was that it wasn't particularly funny. And the reason it's not particularly funny is because they use OpenAI's ChatGPT model, which is heavily censored. And as a result, all the inappropriate jokes, like the, it couldn't do. So it couldn't make the deeply inappropriate jokes that we're all used to with South Park. But that's an example of an agent network that can sew together content that's templated, right? Think about any syndicated series that you've seen, Futurama, The Simpsons, et cetera. You've got years, not decades of training data, and these tools can leverage that. The open source movement itself is becoming a giant player in this space, thanks to Meta, formerly Facebook, releasing their models, throwing them out to the world. It was an interesting play by Facebook. Instead of making a tool like a ChatGPT, they gave away the engine itself and said, everyone else, go have fun. Within 24 hours, there were 310 variations of their model that people are starting to customize for specific uses. Here's one that is tuned specifically to be a German assistant. These tools are incredibly good. They're free, and they even run on good, reasonable hardware. We are seeing ecosystems. These models are specific. This is one called Karen the Editor. All it does is edit grammar. Right? It can't do anything else, but it's been so finely tuned to be that you can take one of these open source models, run it on your laptop for a very specific purpose. Silly Taverns is another example. It can tie in a bunch of different tools. So that virtual focus group, you can hook up to a tool like 11 Labs and have those synthetic personalities actually speaking. If you wanted to hear yet another conference call for some reason, you could have these tools generate that. Even in ChatGPT, there are now tools that the plugins you can use that bring additional capabilities to it. These tools are now also exhibiting actual creativity. Again, as we saw in the nature study, they are more creative on average than humans for those specific 14 tasks the study looked at. But these tools do are called hallucinations, which is aka called lying or making things up when they don't know the answer. We normally treat that as bad, but there's an entire research division now saying, well, what if that's not bad? What if we capture those weird mistakes they make and instead turn them into products, right? Turn them into ideas, turn them into things that these hallucinations may be a machine equivalent of human creativity. And these things are becoming accessible. They're everywhere. So Photoshop now has generative AI, Illustrator has it now, Unity, Unreal Engine, the next release will have generative AI. This will have massive implications on content creation. If you're not familiar with Unreal Engine is a video game creation tool. Normally to create a scene requires hundreds of hours. Now you give it a prompt saying like, a lovely park at noon, and it will create the virtual environment, and then you can start filming inside that environment immediately. What I was saying earlier, the horsepower needed to run these tools locally is about the same as what you need to play a video game, right? A modern day video game like Call of Duty, if you can play it at full resolution with no lag, you've got a good graphics card, you can run these models on your machine today. Right? It's not the prettiest interfaces, but they work. And in the case of when it runs on your machine, is totally private. So some final thoughts. With language models, everyone is a developer. Every word you write is code, right? Everything is software. And the next big idea at your company may come from who knows where, because people, as they start using these tools for everything, will naturally create newer and better ideas. More important, from the perspective of humans themselves, these tools are levelers. They set a minimum bar of mediocre, right? I am a terrible singer. I'm a not great artist. I'm an okay photographer. I can't play any instruments, but with these tools, I can do most of those tasks now at a mediocre level. Right? The things I could not do at all are now capabilities that I have. So now the most important valuable asset you have in your companies is your ideas, because these tools still don't run themselves. These tools are just tools. They need ideas. So your ideas can now be brought to life in ways they never could before. And that is what's going to separate the winners from the losers, as everyone has access to the technology, as everyone has access to the prompts and the way to write these things. Now it's going to come down to whose ideas are better. If you would like, there's a free book you can download that's already out of date, but it's not too badly out of date. Again, we'll put this in the slides. And I think we have like a minute for questions.
Or a little bit. Okay, so if you're online and you have a question, feel free to type that into the chat window and I'll go hear it. From the audience here, we have a few as they came in, but if you have questions now, we'll take them.
Go ahead in the back.
Just one clarification on the copyright issue that you raised, which I thought very interesting. As it pertains to some of these newer applications, like for instance, created image. If you were, let's say you were creating a branded layout for an advertisement, and you custom created an image using machine learning that was a part of that advertisement, is that going to be copyrightable within the totality of the layout, or is that going to prevent you from copywriting the whole ad?
So this is still unsettled in law. I've asked my lawyer this question in many different variations. There is no like minimum percentage that dictates what is and is not copyrightable. The rule that she has said is, it is, if a machine made it, whether it's a pixel, a part, the entire thing, that portion cannot be copyrighted. If there are parts that humans did, that can be. So for example, if I write a prompt, an outline, and ChatGPT writes a blog post, ChatGPT did the work, it cannot be copyrighted. If ChatGPT writes the outline and I write the post, even though the ideas were machine made, human hands did the physical labor, and therefore that is copyrightable. So that's sort of the dividing line. And again, if you have a blog post where you have a third of it was made by machine, or certain sentences were made by machine, you can't copyright those. So portions of that are no longer copyrightable. It has not been resolved more in law yet. There will be cases, I'm certain, very soon that will try to, because we know that the big intellectual property companies, Disney and so on and so forth, are pushing very hard to make sure that AI generated work that they make can be copyrighted because they want to be able to make money on it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I'll give a second question. We're chatting back here, sorry about that. DALL-E is now available on ChatGPT. Turns out that Mattel is using DALL-E, which is a visual design software, to create Hot Wheels designs. How do they copyright the designs? I mean, they can concept cars completely on their laptops using verbal commands. How are they going to protect the Hot Wheels designs?
They can't. If it is machine generated and is provable, here's the challenge. It has to be provable in the court of law. So if you don't disclose it, then I guess you could have a he said, she said kind of thing and use some of the tools that can detect AI content are highly unreliable.
So somebody like, an engineering firm designing a new piece of equipment, that wouldn't be copyrighted or?
If it was machine made, it cannot be copyrighted.
Or
Yeah, it cannot be copyrighted.
patent?
So patents are different than copyrights.
Okay,
And I've not talked to my lawyer about patents.
okay, sorry.
Other questions?
Good answer, thank you.
Yeah.
So it seems like this has come on incredibly accelerated.
Yes.
And so I feel like we're, as a company, trying to kind of just get our heads around how do we use this, do we use this, and being very cautious. We're very private with our data, we're very conscientious about making sure that we're protecting our trade secrets, we're protecting our copyrights, we're protecting our branding. So we've kind of taken a step back and evaluate stance. At the same time, it feels like it's trickling into our existing tech stack, whether or not we like it. It's filtering into, like overnight, it seems like Adobe stock half the images there. Sprout Social that we use suddenly has ChatGPT integrated.
Yes.
Photoshop, as you mentioned, has all these generative things that, suddenly like appears and it wants you to use them and is encouraging you to use them and saying you're identifying. Are there best practices for how we can, even if we're trying to kind of step back and just evaluate, to how we should change, how we're just approaching the existing tools that we're using today to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, not opening ourselves to liability and protecting our information?
So that's a really good question, basically on how do you overall govern this stuff, and it's going to be very similar to the process that that companies use for governing the use of these things at work, right? Because this is technology you don't control that everyone's bringing to work with all the time, and yes, these things are sources of incredible amounts of leakage, and as you point out, it is infiltrating in every aspect. So the questions that you need to ask are all governance ones about what is and is not allowed, what employees can and can't do, what the consequences are of doing those things or not doing those things, but then also looking at foundational levels in your company of how is this going to change our business, right? That's where the fun of 2x2 matrices comes in, is to say, we know change is coming. We know this is going to be in our software, whether we want it or not. How do we adapt to it? What are the guardrails we're going to put around it? So for example, like you could say, you can or should use these things for things that don't need copyright. Like, hey, you're writing a memo to a client, that does not need a copyright, right? That's totally safe to use. You're presenting a report internally. Again, doesn't need a copyright, totally safe to use. Having the understanding of the legal landscape is important. Having a risk assessment done is really important. So what are the risks if these tools, if certain data leaks out? And then what is the roadmap for your company to get to that? Because again, this is not going to slow down. If anything, the companies that are building these tools, particularly the language models, have some very strange incentives. They're not motivated by profit on these. Professor Ethan Mollick of Wharton was talking to them, and they said they have this almost religious zeal internally. They are trying to call race to be the first to create a superintelligence, to create a self-aware machine. And they kind of said, okay, we're going to just disregard safety and just try and go for this as fast as possible. And so what you see happening in the marketplace is the result of that work. This stuff can be risky, can be dangerous. And the technology community has kind of collectively said, cool, we're going for it anyway. That attitude spreads throughout our tech stack. So we have to figure out where are the permissible cases so that people get some of the benefits from it and don't feel like they have to sneak around. Because as everyone knows here from marketing is the largest IT consumer in the company, right? The CMO has more IT budget than the CIO does in some companies. And that creates this whole shadow IT problem that we've had for 20 years now that we still haven't fixed. And so this is just going to be another thing on that pile. So to the extent that you can have any kind of governance for it internally, that will mitigate some of the risks. There's no good answer on that.
Take two more.
What are your thoughts on the atrophy of either personal skill sets or societal skill sets as these take hold, like over time?
So that's a very interesting question about the atrophy of skill sets. It happens, but it's been happening, right? We don't remember our friends' phone numbers. We just have contacts on our phone. Anyone under 30 probably who has not been in the military probably can't use a map, right? If you hand them a paper map, they're like, where do I go? The question is, do those skill sets matter, right? Obviously, if the military is still teaching you, there's some value to it for not getting lost. But we will outsource more and more of our capabilities to machines where and when it makes sense to do so. There will be instances where that's problematic. So around writing skill in particular, writing is already not a great skill to most people. This levels up people to that mediocrity, but it does not promote skill development, right? Because you just hand it to the machine and it does it instead. And so the probable outcomes, the number of excellent writers will be fewer. They will still be there because if you love writing, you love writing no matter what. But for a lot of other folks, they will kind of rise to the level of what the machine's capable of and kind of stay there. Again, that might be okay. In a business context, if a person is no longer sending illiterate emails, that's okay, right? Do you care if they're a great writer or not? Maybe you don't. But if they're in a creative role, you probably want to figure out who your strongest creators are and make sure that they are still practicing their craft. Last question.
Yeah, Microsoft claims that their Azure OpenAI service is safe to use with enterprise data. Is that the case?
It depends on your contract with them. You have to look at the terms of service to see what they can and can't use the data for. I believe for Azure Enterprise, I believe there is a whole confidentiality thing. The challenge I have with that is for very sensitive data, it's still on someone else's hardware. So if you're working with really, really sensitive data, like say someone's genetic data, you probably want to put it in the most secure environment you have. Now that might be at a cloud provider. If you don't have IT capabilities in your company, a cloud provider might be the best choice. But we also have had plenty of people who've left an S3 bucket unprotected on the web, and suddenly 4 terabytes of company data is on the Pirate Bay. So on paper, it sounds secure. In actuality, it's as secure as you make it in those systems. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Take a break. Feel free to go out and grab what's out there and have a snack, chat. I'll join Chris again. And for those that are joining us online, we will resume at 11. Keep the language, you can leave it on your laptop, and just come back and see us at 11. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we good, you made it. I was like, I gotta find out what it was.